A huge thank you to patron My Imaginary Friend for suggesting today's video topic. If you want to suggest a topic for next Wednesday's Name Explain video, all you have to do is support Name Explain on Patreon for $1 a month. Find out more by visiting patreon.com/Name Explain, which will be linked down below. Anyway, the nation of Tonga can be found in the South Pacific Ocean and is part of a region known as Polynesia. It is made up of over 170 islands, but collectively has a land area of just around 750 kilometers squared and a population of just over 100,000. It's safe to say that Tonga isn't the biggest of nations on the planet, though despite being so small, the nation has a language of its own. While English is widely spoken there due to the nation's colonial history with the British Empire, it is also home to the language of Tongan. This language is part of the Polynesian branch of the larger Austronesian language family. Its closest relative is the language of Niuean, the official language of the nearby island nation of Niue, but more distant relatives include the likes of Maori, Samoan, and Tahitian. It makes a lot of sense as to why the native language of Tonga will be called Tongan, right? Most languages derive their names from the people who speak it or the place it derives from. French from France, Japanese from Japan, German from Germany. But the strange thing about the name of Tonga is the fact that it's also used as the name for another set of languages. And these languages are not at all nearby to Tonga. There's a selection of native languages in Africa that are all called Tonga. Not Tongan, however. That alteration of the name Tonga is reserved just for the language of Tonga itself. They're simply just called Tonga. The largest of these African Tonga languages is the language of Tonga, spoken primarily in the nation of Zambia, with some speakers in northern Zimbabwe, which makes sense as Zimbabwe is directly south of Zambia. Slight tangent, but isn't it really neat that the only two countries that start with Z are next to each other? But aside from this Tonga, there is another Tonga language spoken in Malawi, which is east of Zambia, as well as another language named Tonga in Mozambique, which lies further east of Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. This is a really fun little linguistic quirk, a cluster of countries in Southeast Africa which all speak to varying degrees unique languages that share their name with a Polynesian island nation that's over 15,000 kilometers away from them. What makes things even more confusing is the fact that not only are all these three African tongues not related to the Tongan of Tonga, but they aren't even really that closely related to one another. All three of them are Bantu languages, a large branch of the Atlantic Congo family which dominates sub-Saharan Africa, but they all belong to different sub-branches of Bantu. The Tonga spoken in Zambia and Zimbabwe is part of the Botswana Bantu branch, the Tonga of Malawi is part of the Nyasa Bantu branch, and the Tonga of Mozambique is part of the Southern Bantu branch. These three African Tonga languages also all have different amounts of speakers, and thankfully to make things slightly less confusing, slightly more unique names they are also known by. The Tonga language spoken in Zambia and Zimbabwe is also known as Zambenzi and has over 1 million speakers. Malawi's Tonga, known natively as Shitonga, has about 170,000 speakers, and Mozambique's Gitonga, as it is locally known, has over 300,000 speakers. Each of these languages called Tonga have more speakers than the language of Tongan that is spoken in the actual nation of Tonga. Wild. Imagine if somewhere in the depths of South America there was an indigenous language that was just called France or something. That would be weird, right? Well, that's basically what is happening here. Languages that share their name with a country an incredibly huge distance away from them. You have to wonder that there might be some kind of strange connection between them all. Did a small group of people from Tonga in the Pacific Ocean go on a huge voyage in the ancient past and settle in Africa? Or maybe Tonga people from Africa settled on the Polynesian island? Or maybe they all derive from some ancient tribe who lived somewhere in Asia that split thousands of years ago. Some travelled in Africa while others travelled to the Pacific. All these hypothetical ideas would make a really fun, interesting YouTube video. But unfortunately, none of them are the truth of the matter. In reality, why these African languages share their name with the island nation of Tonga can boil down to one simple fact. Coincidence. The world is a pretty big place full of a huge amount of people all doing their thing. Sometimes coincidences like this really do just happen. We can tell this is a coincidence for a variety of reasons. First off being that there isn't a huge amount of historical contact that we know of between Tonga/Polynesia as a whole and southeastern Africa. The closest we get is with the Malagasy languages of Madagascar. This is an Austronesian language native to the continent of Africa. And while the Polynesian languages are also part of the Austronesian family, Malagasy is not part of the Polynesian branch and is from a different branch entirely. I mean, it's still pretty cool that Africa has its own Austronesian language though. Another reason as to why we can deduce that these languages and nations aren't related is due to their etymologies. The country of Tonga received its name from the native word of Whakatonga. This means southwards in the language and derives from the fact that the islands that make up Tonga are the southernmost islands in central Polynesia. It seems that the islands were named first and then the people who inhabited it and the language were named after them. This isn't always always the case, however. In many cases, the name of the people came first, and then the country and land were named after them. If a country's name ends with something like ia, stan, or land, then they were probably most likely named after the people, as these suffixes mean the land of. E.g., Poland is the land of the Poles, Kazakhstan is the land of the Kazakhs, and Mongolia is the land of the Mongols. This is the case with the Tonga languages of Africa. These languages were named after the people who speak it, the largest of these groups being the Tonga people of Zambia and Zimbabwe, also known as the Batonga people too. They are believed to have originated in more central Africa before eventually migrating further south along the rivers they found in these lands, where they could farm much more successfully. This is a similar story to the Tongas of Malawi too, known as the Lakeshore Tongas. They once again lived in this land due to the lakes, which meant they could have a more bountiful life and harvest. And this is of course the case yet again for the Tonga people of Mozambique. They seemingly don't have a more unique name though one source said they are known as the Shenwe or Bitonga. It is theorized that the Tonga people of Africa did once all come from the same group of people, though not related to the Tongans of Tonga of course, but dispersed and changed so much in their own lands that today they are no longer all that similar, despite sharing a name. But if we know that Africa's Tonga languages were named after the people who spoke them, then how did these people get their name? Well, this is where the info dries up. These people and their languages come from a part of the world where in the ancient past, written histories were not really kept, favouring oral traditions. This meant that we don't truly know why they're called Tongas. The only noteworthy source that really talked about the etymology of these names was the Oxford English Dictionary, and here it just says that it's a word of self-designation for these people. Without a time machine or some better evidence emerging, we seemingly won't ever be too sure as how the word Tonga popped up in Africa. But if I were to hypothesize on why this is the case, it's most likely because there's only so many sounds that we humans can make. Homonyms pop up all across languages. Even within the same languages, the same word can be used twice for different things. With all these people going around speaking, it makes sense that multiple groups of people would end up using the word Tonga as their name, or their language's name, or even their island's name, despite where the word actually even came from. Especially a word that is relatively easy to say like Tonga. It's a simple two-syllable word made up of some fairly basic sounds that crop up in most languages on the planet. In fact, going back to the OED, there are other things called Tonga too, including a drug from the root of a plant found in Fiji, a drink made by indigenous people in Peru, a kind of cart in India, and the word is even used in Maori to mean a valued object. While it's a shame we can't figure out why exactly Africa's Tonga people are called Tonga, it's still pretty cool to see how much application these two syllables of ton and ga have had in languages across the globe. I would love to know how much connection there is between these people too. Like, is anyone from Tonga now living in a Tonga speaking part of Africa? Or does anyone who speaks the African Tonga now live in the nation of Tonga? Is there anyone out there who can speak both Tonga and Tongan? Let me know if you happen to fit any of my incredibly niche criteria. And to make matters even more confusing, there's actually another language entirely known as Tonga too. This one isn't in Africa or even in the nation of Tonga. It's spoken across Thailand and Malaysia by less than 500 people, known as the Manik, and is also commonly known as Tenend. Once again, why this language is also known as Tonga, we have little to no idea. And despite being relatively closer to the nation of Tonga itself, this language has no linguistic relation to Tongan. It is an Austroasiatic language as opposed to an Austronesian one. This means that the word Tonga is used for the name of a Polynesian island nation, and the slight alteration of Tongan being used for its people and language, as well as being used as the name for 4 other languages that have no relation to Tonga, as well as a collection of other things like plants and drinks and cart and the Maori word for booty. And there's a bunch of other things called Tonga out there too, like don't get me started on the various wrestlers who have Tonga in their name. It'd also be a really fun name for a cat. Someone go name their cat Tonga for me please. It's a strange case where the word of Tonga is in many ways much bigger than the nation of Tonga itself. Also, I've said the word Tonga way too many times in this video, and it's starting to sound really weird. Name Explained depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explained videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/Name Explained or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.